Hi, I'm Sailor Eric. Though this channel is by a sailor, and for those who are interested in becoming sailors, we are all members of the human race and we all go through many of the same life experiences in different ways. In the spirit of sharing a life event, I thought this would be a worthwhile topic for today. In 2013, when I was 45, I was scheduled for and took my first colonoscopy. Word of mouth from my family and friends warned me that the prep, which was to be done the night before the procedure, was much worse than the procedure itself. In addition, I was expected not to eat food for 24 hours, and I was not looking forward to that. I decided to splurge and eat a
Mm.
large portion of spaghetti the night before I was supposed to start all this. On the day prior to the procedure, after eating that spaghetti, I woke up and began that liquid diet. As afternoon turned into evening, I started taking the prep liquid, which was meant to evacuate my bowels in order to leave the colon without residue so that the doctor could examine and address issues without interference. The prep did not taste well at all. And trip after trip to the commode resulted in my backside getting a greater and greater rash like irritation from all that post activity cleaning. About 1/16th of that prep liquid remained, and I couldn't take it anymore.
No, no, no,
I
no,
flushed it
no.
down the sink. The color of the fluid coming out of my body was consistent with the intended color chart provided by the hospital, so I felt pretty good about that. On the day I arrived at the hospital for the procedure, everything seemed to go extraordinarily well. I was put into a gown on a gurney. A doctor talked to me and had me sign a form acknowledging the risks. The nurses were all pleasant. An IV was placed into my arm and I was out. I slept like a baby through the entire procedure. The next thing I remember, I was in a hazy state, waking up, and the doctor was telling me that the colonoscopy was a fail. I replied, "What do you mean it was a fail?" And he responded, "Was the last food you ate spaghetti?" Okay, so if you like the story so far, I'd ask you to please press that like button. It's certainly going to motivate me to give you future content, and it's going to help my site gain traction. It's now 11 years later, in the wake of my last physical, and fully knowing that I intend to soon retire and travel the world, hopefully on a sailboat. I succumbed to my doctor's recommendations to do another colonoscopy, and of course, I bore some trepidation as the weeks passed and the appointment approached. This time they put me on a 2-day liquid only diet, which I fully adhered to, I'm proud to say. This was not easy. At the end of day one fasting, I was instructed to take an over the counter laxative called magnesium citrate. This started the process of visiting the bathroom, which I had to do multiple times throughout the night. I did not sleep well. My stomach was gurgling. I was not allowed to drink coffee with cream and found that the coffee alone was upsetting my stomach. Headaches ensued on top of hunger pains. I worked from home remotely on the second day, which was a long day. I started my prep immediately after work. At 3:45 I started, and by 5:30 I had finished the prep. The prep tasted like a chalky carbonated substance. The product was called sodium sulfate, potassium sulfate, and magnesium sulfate oral solution. The instructions say to take 2 glasses of water after drinking the prep. In practice, it seemed like this prep magically routed all the water that what I was drinking from the system making urine to the system making feces. This meant that the water was routing straight down my intestines and through my colon. I made about 4 or 5 trips to the bathroom and leveraged some witch hazel pads to protect against undue chafing in the rump from the extra wiping required. This was something I learned from my last experience. Did not want that rash effect again. I was fortunate to sleep for 2 to 3 hours after that experience, and I was awoke, unfortunately, by more calls to the commode. I snuck in maybe a half hour sleep. I went probably 3 hours not sleeping. But I did fall asleep, and then shortly after was woken by an alarm because I had to get up at 3:30 a.m. to take my second dose of prep. And then a similar cycle began all over again with 4 to 5 visits to the commode, gurgling stomach, and water pouring through my body through the colon area. Certainly, I was tired with an empty stomach, but given the color of what was coming out, I felt very, very confident that the doctor would be pleased by my diligence and adherence to the directions provided ahead of this procedure. I arrived at the hospital 15 minutes early and ended up waiting an extra 40 minutes before things started happening. On this occasion, I did not completely fall asleep during the procedure, and I was able to catch some of what was going on a monitor which was hanging within my line of sight. Time seemed to go pretty fast, and I did feel some rooting around down there because I was conscious. But before you know it, the nurse said the procedure was finished. I'm pleased to report that the colonoscopy was completed successfully. Some polyps were removed, which is fairly common during such a procedure. In the end, I think my worrying ahead of this ordeal was much more, it was much worse than the actual ordeal itself. There were many points during the 2 days of fasting that I had energy, was somewhat productive. This effort is all for the peace of mind required to avoid a common type of cancer, which has impacted my family directly. I'm told I'll have the full results from the biopsies took from the removed polyps in a few days, but I'm happy to close the door on this part of the process. I'm still very new to publishing YouTube videos, so I would love to read any comments you might have on how I could improve. Please leave your comments below. If you enjoyed that story, please press that like button. And for those of you that are interested in content by a sailor and for aspiring sailors, please subscribe for upcoming content. Thanks for watching.